The FDA and CDC have signed off on a second booster shot of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines for people ages 50 and up. This shot can be given at least 4 months after a first booster dose, and it comes, as we're learning, the BA.2 subvariant of Omicron is now the dominant coronavirus variant in all of the United States. Here to discuss, Dr. Peter Hotez. He's the co-director for vaccine development at Texas Children's Hospital and a dean at the Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Hotez, so let's talk about the fourth shot before we get into what it all means in terms of the BA.2 variant being dominant. But when should people go out and get this shot that is newly authorized? Should they consider when they got their previous booster? How should they go about this?
Yeah, I think the time frame is if you're out 4 months from your last booster. So if you got your third immunization, your second booster more than 4 months ago, you should get a booster if you're eligible, which means over the age of 50, or if you're immunocompromised, or if you've gotten 2 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you can, and you're more than 4 months out from that, you can get a booster as well. And the reason for it is based on two studies. One by the Centers for Disease Control showing that if you're several months out after your booster, after your third dose, you have a decline in your protection against both emergency room visits and hospitalizations. So 66% protection against emergency room visits, 78% against hospitalizations if you're more than several months out of your booster. Not terrible, but not as good as it was. And so that's a reason for it. The other is data out of Israel, where they're ahead of us on this, that shows a definite advantage in terms of reduction in hospitalizations and emergency room visits if you get that fourth immunization. Not as much data as you would ideally like, but enough given the fact that this BA.2 subvariant seems to be on its way.
I mean, as my dad always says, part of the reason for some of the lack in data is that it's all happening in real time. We are living through a lot of this data analysis that's taking place. What does it mean for the next few weeks that the BA.2 subvariant of Omicron is the dominant variant in the United States? Are the numbers going to start to go back up like we saw with Omicron?
Well, we saw it with Omicron, we saw it with the Delta variant, we saw it with the Alpha variant, so you would logically assume, well, therefore we'll see it with the BA.2 subvariant of Omicron. Not so fast, though. It turns out that in some countries, as BA.2 has become the dominant variant, the numbers really go up, just like you started to see with Omicron. But in other countries, that's not necessarily the case. So in the past, when we've seen that more than 50% of the virus isolates are the new variant, we've said, watch out, the numbers are really going to skyrocket. This time around, it's not as clear cut, not as obvious. So we're all kind of holding our breath to see, are we going to look more like the UK, where the numbers really did go up, or like some other countries? And I do think the numbers will start to go up. I just don't know if it's going to be something that resembles our Omicron wave or something much more modest. But the bottom line is, if you're eligible for that second boost, get it.
Well, you mentioned that the booster's effectiveness wanes over time. So can you help us understand why we would be different than what happened in the UK? Why we're different than some of these other places that have been overrun by BA.2 already? Why are experts optimistic at all that it's going to end up fine? That hasn't happened over the whole pandemic so far.
Zerlina, I was just on a Zoom call with colleagues, and pretty much that's what we all asked the same question. Why it's going up, accelerating in some countries but not others, even though BA.2 is becoming dominant, is a bit of a head scratcher. So we don't exactly know. Now it could go up just like the others. It may have to do something with the fact that it's so closely spaced with what Omicron is, and this is kind of a subvariant of Omicron. Actually, BA.2 and Omicron arose out of South Africa around the same time. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe there are other extenuating factors, such as people wearing masks and that sort of thing. So I wish I had a clean answer for you on this one like I did the other variants, but that is the reality.
Well, people here are not wearing masks, so that probably is not the explanation. I want to quote U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, because he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times where he states that, quote, "Until recently, we've had the funding to make sure that there will be enough vaccines and antiviral drugs to meet the nation's needs. Now, for the very first time, we cannot order enough vaccines to provide boosters for all Americans if a fourth dose is deemed necessary in the fall. If we need variant-specific vaccines, we will not have the funds to secure them, deliver them, or administer them." You just explained that we're all going to need a fourth shot. The FDA and CDC are saying so too. But do we have the money to do that?
Yeah, there seems to be a disconnect with Congress, and we've got to fix that. And it's not only just the boosters, you know, Zerlina, it's also that Paxlovid antiviral drug, which we're going to need for a number of people, especially if they're under-vaccinated or unvaccinated. It's also we still have a couple of monoclonals that should work against the BA.2 subvariant. And by the way, the BA.2 subvariant may be the warm-up act for what could come later this summer, because in the last 2 summers over the southern states and here in Texas, we've had terrible waves from variants coming from abroad. And then likely next winter, we could see another wave. So this is not over. So it's really important that we push Congress to mobilize resources so we can have everything we can to fight this pandemic.
It's really important to understand that. I wish Congress would stop acting like the pandemic is over just because they want it to be over. It feels like this is going to be a cyclical situation, so you might want to get the funding on some sort of schedule. Dr. Peter Hotez, thank you so much for being here. Please stay safe.
Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.